Hello, my name is Cassandra Nunez, and I am doing my presentation on Buddhism and Jainism, the similarities and differences, sort of compare and contrast. Um, I am gonna try to keep the screen to where you can see me and my presentation. If that fails at any time, I'm still here. This is live. So I would like to start with. A picture I found of both Mahavira and Buddha. And I really like this picture particularly because you sort of see the similarities just in like the depiction of the individuals. You see the Buddha and Mahavira's style of meditation, the way their legs are crossed and their hands are positioned, their upright position, sort of like this faint smile, sort of no worries in their faces, a halo sort of in the back, and they're both sitting on what it looks like a little bit like a throne. I don't know what else to call it. So before we continue, and I completely forgot to mention this, there are some words in this presentation that I might be chopping. I really try really hard to remember how to pronounce the names and the certain words of certain practices, and it just didn't stick. And I am bilingual, so I understand how important it is to try to get them right, but I really did try. So hopefully I don't do too bad. And if I do chop up a word, please, I don't mean disrespect. This is just a part of trying to share a little of what I learned, and I really gladly did learn. So Jina means liberated soul, and Buddhism means those who follow the teachings of Buddha. Jainism is an Indian religion, or rather, it started in India, which teaches a path to spiritual purity and enlightenment through disciplined nonviolence. And they really take this seriously, the nonviolence part, from monks to like those who practice it in a non-monk life. This is one of their major core values. This is like what sets them apart. Their non-injury or non-violence to all living creatures. Buddhists believe that nothing is fixed on or permanent, and that change is always possible. The path to enlightenment is through the practice of development of morality, meditation, and wisdom. And here is just a, again, simple depiction of how closely related these two religions can seem. Yet their differences are much more significant just in like getting to the particular of every single one of their practices. So the origin and development of Buddhism. Um, Siddharth, Siddhartha Gautama, whose name actually means "he whose aim is accomplished," was born in southern Nepal to royal parents, Siddhodana and Maya. There are different accounts of his birth, one being that the night he was conceived, while his mother, Queen Maya, was asleep, a white elephant entered her side, painlessly just saw the elephant there and started coming and to her side. Um, Later, upon his arrival to this world, he jumped from his mother's side um, and said, which was the same side the elephant had gone through, and said, "I've been born to achieve awakening or bodhi, for the good of the world. This is my last birth." Now, this, I know this sounds like a little sort of fantasy told, but uh, this I got from our textbook, and it did say that this account is not shared by all who practice Buddhism, but it is one of the many accounts that exist. So his father, King Siddhartha, called upon the sages and asked them to interpret. After they observed the child, they interpreted that the child's oddity as a sign that he would become either a successful king or a great religious leader. Another account suggests Asita or Kala, Kaladevala, Kaladevala, sorry, who was a hermit ascetic of India, was the interpreter of such signs, and that for those who practice Buddhism and have read the Bodhisattva, know that Gautama Buddha is one of the 27 Buddhas, and that we are still waiting in the arrival of the future Buddha, Maitreya. So this is just repeating a little bit of this. So for those who know about Buddhism but don't practice, like myself, I found out that there were actually 26 prior Buddhas. Although the number changed, I did see some claim 28 Buddhas, and Gautama be the 28th. But most said 27, and him being the last Buddha recorded. But that also there is a future Buddha, and that people hope to see like a Buddha who is to come. And I actually, in one of the two temple visits I did, one of them had a like it's the jolly looking Buddha. He's a little chubby and smiling. I asked one of the monks who was that, like why is that Buddha different from the one inside the temple where we were meditating, and he said that that was the future Buddha. So I didn't quite get it when he said that, but now that I did this research, it makes sense that that's whom he this is probably mentioning. So the origin and development of Jainism. So Mahavira and the Buddha were actually alive and running around the same time. Um, it's interesting to know this because both again have so many similarities that it seems like one would influence the other. And although there are folks who claim this, it might not be necessarily that. They just were around at the same time. So Jainism, Buddhism, and Hinduism were three religions that were sort of around the same time. In a similar way, Jainism was founded by Mahavira, or his name is Great Hero. However, other 23 Titankras have existed before Mahavira, the 24th and last one being Mahavira. Some believe that he was in the womb of a Brahman woman and then was transferred by Hari Nagamesi, who is a divine commander of Indra, the king of the highest heaven army, to the womb of Trishala, who was of the warrior caste, which again, this is similar to Buddha. Buddha's mother, she was also from the caste, the warrior caste. So Mahavira's life was similar to Buddha's. Before his birth, his mother had dreams that foretold Mahavira's future as a great leader. Furthermore, Mahavira also grew up in a privileged royal family and renounced to his life, his ascetic life, to live an ascetic life in pursuit of spiritual awakening. So, if you look at the Buddha's life, it tells you that he grew up in a as royalty. His dad tried to protect him a lot from seeing death and basically human decay, like dying people, sick people, or rather dead people, sick people, and old people. And so when he went out, he told his dad, well, how can I be a good leader if I don't know my people? I'm always in here. So his dad said, okay, go look around. And he did. And he saw a sick guy, a dead guy, and a person living an ascetic life. And that's what started his road. And so in a very similar way, not in the being protected, but in renouncing that lifestyle of king or royalty rather. Mahavira, lived through something similar, and so that's another similarity we see here. Another one would be that the two, Buddha and Mahavira, achieve enlightenment, or what James called uh, Kevala Jnana, infinite knowledge, under a tree. Mahavira's tree was a Sala tree, and Buddha's tree was a Bodhi tree. So that's again another similar thing that we see. So again, these two leaders were contemporaries. They both live around the same time. The two leaders did not have a connection much. There are some accounts that, um, like James believed that teachings of the Buddha came from Mahavira, which is their explanation why they have similar moral obligations, sexual conducts, and other things. Some terms like karma, although the understanding of karma is different, there's is still sort of some in some level similar. However, in Buddhism, I cannot I cannot say there isn't a connection, but I could not find one. So James did mention that Mahavira was sort of the one who, because he was born first, and I don't mean like centuries first, it's some years apart, that Mahavira's teachings were the ones that um, sort of inspired the Buddha to become the Buddha leader, or to get to that Buddha state. And the next slide. Oh, so this is a view of the followers. I mean, in comparison of followers, Buddhism is like around 100 times more followed than and has a further reach than Jainism. As stated before, it was founded in India and now expanding to East Asia and reaching the US. It is the fifth largest religion. And so you see here, I'm pointing, but you can't see pointing anyways. Oh, here, this works. So if you see here, the US has very much been reached, not to a severe height, but that's just how farther out Buddhism has reached out. And I feel confident to say that it and even further than what is reported here. And then if you look on this side and you see, denser numbers or percentages in this area. What's interesting in both, and I'll go ahead and move to the next slide, is that although both started in India, neither of them hold a majority of followers in India. Hinduism actually has a higher number of followers in India. Um, Buddhism, because it spread towards the East, was that East Asia area, you get more of that area covered. However, Jainism, again, it's a very small, I mean, comparison with all the other religions around, it's a very small, has a very small number of followers. So if we look here, this is all in India. And although Jainism is mainly concentrated in pockets around India, it is also found in Lower Asia subcontinent, America, and in smaller clusters around the world. And this is just obviously because of the expansion of just people being able to travel easier now. I think that number has significantly grown in like worldly, but still the biggest population you'll find following that philosophy would be in India. So Buddhism and Jainism have subgroups. Some some of the readings I in my research call them sects, sects. But I feel weird about using that word. Sort of makes it has negative connotation. These are just different expressions of Buddhism and sort of how it's divided, and as well as Jainism. If you look in this, both religions have subgroups or different ways to practice their philosophies. In Jainism, right here, can I move this? Yeah, great. So right here, I'm sorry if I was covering the guy. He's completely naked, but this is part of Jainism. Um, in Jainism, Digambara believes that women cannot achieve nirvana, and the guy that's naked here is the one following Digambara. They believe that women cannot achieve nirvana or liberation directly. They first have to be reborn as a man for this to happen, and they give two reasons for this. And if you look at Jainism, only has two sects that I could find, or two subgroups. Um, Buddhism has three, and the reason why, and again, I'm just briefly going to touch on some differences. There are so many more. I just couldn't fit them all into like a slide, and I really didn't want to talk your ear up about all the differences between the two groups in Jainism, these two. But and I again, these are like the extremes, I guess I'll say, expressions of Jainism, because there are also folks who consider themselves Jains or follow the Jain philosophy, but do not go around wearing white and are obviously not walking around naked. And so, which is like a third group per se that is sort of like normal folks just living their normal lives in with Jain philosophy in it. So again, coming back to the Kamara's reason why women cannot achieve enlightenment or achieve nirvana, and I found this really interesting. Um, the Gambara monks are completely naked. So, in their view, this is not possible for women, as they have to possess clothes. In other words, the view of a naked woman is not accepted in this society, or where among this group. However, the view of a naked man is like no big deal. I mean, I'm sure it's still uncomfortable, but for this group particularly, they're like okay with being naked around each other. It is impractical for women in this society to live naked, but and due to this, they cannot lead the life of a true monk, and hence cannot achieve liberation. Um, because part of being of not being attached to anything, including clothing, um, it's needed for this group in order to achieve liberation. So the Gambaras also believe that women are inherently hemistic, which means because women get menstrual cycles, blood is killing microorganisms living in the female body. So this is going against the no violence. Remember at the beginning of this presentation, I said they take this really seriously. And so women cannot achieve um, nirvana or this ultimate blissful liberation as women, because through our menstrual cycle we are killing living organisms inside our own bodies. So this is not possible. Though there is no scientific evidence of this view, is found in modern Jain thinking. Svetambra, on the other hand, have a different opinion. According to them, women are equally capable of achieving liberation as a man. They believe in Savastra Mukti. Other differences between the two are involving their possessions, like dressing in white. Obviously, you see this picture. This guy has this white clothing and his face is covered. This guy's just completely naked. And it has to do with nonviolence. Birth of Mahavira. One group believes the birth account is different than the other. Um, the depictions of their idols. One group de- has their idols with like sort of royalty with gold earrings, like gold on their head. Not necessarily a crown, just like gold on their head. Sort of very well dressed, very nice looking. And the other group has their depictions of idols more bare, more aesthetic lifestyle, even naked. So that's another difference between the two. In Buddhism, here there are the three groups: Mahayana, Vajrayana, I'm sorry, and Theravada. And these two particular ones, Theravada and Mahayana, are the main ones, I believe, that um, exist today. And there's the third group that it's a more um, a smaller group. So after the Buddha's death, differing opinions arose concerning the correct teachings and practices of Buddhism. Eventually, three main Buddhist traditions formed: Theravada, Mahayana, and Tibet. And Trivada is sort of the way of the elders, a more, I guess, to put it in a little bit in our Western perspective, a more orthodox way, oldest tradition, and monks and nuns are very much part of this practice or of this group. Um, Mahayana teaches people can help each other find enlightenment, so this is more of a team effort. Um, you don't have to be a monk or nun to achieve enlightenment. And with Shiva's enlightened people not yet passed to nirvana to help others. So I will talk later about the idea of gods, but both of these religions have gods. They just don't have like sort of the idea of the Christian God, where God is a creator and God is sort of in some of Christian beliefs, not all, this guy sitting on a throne judging people from the top, or that style of thinking of a god. They have a different thinking, and the Bodhisattvas is part of this idea of God, and I'll talk about it later. There you go. So philosophy. So both of these religions have uh, a similar. They have similar terms for their philosophy, although they don't mean the same thing. So in their philosophy, in the sense of salvation, just to put a name to it, Buddhism's goal is to attain enlightenment or nirvana following the teachings of the Buddha, while Jainism is to release one's soul from the literal bondage of karma, achieving nirvana and becoming this perfect free soul, with no attachments whatsoever in an eternal bliss. So both religions express an importance of karmatic actions. Although the understanding of it might be a slight different, Jains see karma as a physical substance, an actual, literal physical substance, like atoms that cover the world. And they actually think that karma, good or bad, clings to you until it's released. So you're living your life and a piano falls on you. That was like bad karma that was literally clinging on you, and it calls like for energy, and it creates outcomes. The word karma means actions, not results, which a lot of people think karma is sort of like the results of your action. it actually is, it's not viewed in either of these as such. It's actually seen as little actions, like what you do. And so, if you continue to attract karma into your life, the longer you continue to rebirth, on awareness or even in thought. So, um, if you keep attracting karma and keep doing bad things, you will continue in the cycle of rebirth. And Jains don't see rebirth as a good thing. It doesn't matter if you die, and are rebirth as the next queen. It's still not what you want, because we have suffering in this world, and being alive in this world means suffering, and rebirthing means you continue into the suffering. Attachment to things, people, places, attachment in general brings a great deal of pain, because you're bound to die, and having to lose that, or someone else dies and having to lose them. So it's this idea that if you continue into the cycle of rebirth, no matter what you come back as, it's not good. So in Buddhism, karma is the good or bad actions one takes in one's life. So this in Buddhism, the karmatic actions, or the actions you're taking, could be in full awareness or in non-awareness. Buddhism is a practice of being aware of what you're doing and what you're doing. So we do a lot of things without thinking. And this was something interesting I actually saw while meditating in one of my visits to one of the Buddhist temple. I actually did a meditation time, and it was pretty lengthy. I believe, I don't remember if it was like an hour or an hour and a half, but we did meditation in several ways. One of them was sitting down, one of them was standing up, another one was walking, and it'll be like faster walking, faster walking, faster walking, faster walking, and then slowing down. But as I was being, taking part of this the entire time, I watched a video before that said you have to be mindful of what you're doing. And so sitting down, being mindful of how you're sitting down, being mindful of how you're breathing. I mean, an example of this is that I'm doing this presentation and being mindful that I'm giving this presentation. I'm not just pouring information on you. I'm mindful of what I'm doing, and seeing how I'm doing it. And so when you look at karma, action, good or bad, the being mindful of what you're thinking is certainly cause of good or bad karma. So if you accidentally start letting your mind wander into um, thinking bad about others, or if you accidentally start gossiping, because sometimes even in just regular conversations we end up gossiping, not what you want, but it just sort of goes there. That gives you bad karma. So whether you're aware of what you're doing or not, karma is coming, like it's accumulating. And so this creates a negative or positive result in one's life. Again, it's still in here, karma is not the result, but the action. Um, in Jainism, Dharma is simply. Oh, and just quickly to go back um, in Jainism, karma can be. You can liberate yourself from karma by becoming a monk. You sort of like burn it all away. In Buddhism, you actually. I believe it comes back through the cyclical life. You can also become a Buddhist monk or nun, but I think there are more opportunities to get there with Buddhism than Jainism. And Dharma in Jainism is simply recognized as religion. That's the only thing I can find regarding Dharma in Jainism. I read several things, um, but they kept coming back to using Jain Dharma, which is just religion of Jain. On the other hand, Buddhism has a deeper meaning, which can be considered as the cosmic law and order. And in this, it's a little more. a little closer to the Dharma of Hinduism. Um, so it also means the teachings of Buddha. Moksha in both means the liberation of soul. In Jainism, this is the liberation of all karma bond, of the cyclical life and death, and to stay in achieve a state of bliss or nirvana. So moksha exists in an understanding of um, letting go of all the good and bad karma. I mean, you're not no longer in rebirth. You have gotten to a point where you are just in a bliss, and this is nirvana as well. Um, so another similarity. So in Buddhism, its closest term is vimutti, which means release, and with release comes nirvana. So again, sort of a non-attachment that you find in both, not being attached to people, things, especially things, but people, things, places help you live um, a life that's closest to an enlightened one. And it's hard in this human life to not, because we have friendships, and we have people and communities, so it is a really hard thing to do. Both religions hold that life is lived in a series of cycles, which means we are rebirth until we achieve liberation. In Jainism, or enlightenment in Buddhism, achieving nirvana. It looks different in both because Buddhism, karma has to do with the rebirth. Good karma gives you good rebirths, and bad karma gives you bad rebirths, births, basically. Um, so another similarity in their practices is a belief of the cyclical life caused by samsara. When we died, our souls move to a new body and we continue on the cyclical life. So again, this life in cycles is something that's seen in both very much. So scriptures. Um, oops. So the scriptures, teachings of Buddha, we have the Tripitaka, Pali Canon, which contains Buddha's teachings and also some of his students' teachings or writings, Mahayana Sutras, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. In Jainism, you find the teachings of the 24 Tirthankars, called the Agamas, and other canonical text. And in this, I found that unfortunately many of the original teachings of Mahavira had been lost. And around 300 BCE, 350 BCE, a famine killed off main Jain monks, and with them the memory of many Jain texts. So actually, both groups agree on this. A group of texts called Purvas were lost in this famine. And regarding most of the texts being lost, one group holds this to be true, where the other one says that no, most of the text was saved. And is that all I want to say there? Yes. I'm gonna move this here or here. So God or the divine. So this is a little bit about what I was talking about earlier. Buddhism and Jainism believe in no God. Jains believe that the world has always existed, but there's no creator God, no sense of this one dude molding stuff or speaking and it having it appear. Jains believe that the world, and so Buddhism, no, sorry, Jains and Buddhism worship gods, but understanding them to be stuck on this level of where other gods are at. It's mostly their understanding, and are more likely that those those beings are there to guide you. Um, Buddhists particularly think this, but they both have these gods. They're just not like creating gods, or these are beings who got sort of stuck in Buddhist on purpose to help folks achieve enlightenment. Um, and so a lot of them, and worship is in quotation marks because it's not necessarily worship the way we worship, Christians worship God. It looks more like asking for guidance and telling, getting them to help in certain situations. Like some of them believe that these gods have some type of influence in being able to intercede in life. So that's another way that these gods are worshipped. Oops. There you go. So lifestyle, the practices of monks, nuns, and others. So Jainism has this belief. It's called the Three Jewels, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna. Yep, this is it. So Jainisms have this belief of the Three Jewels, and which is mostly followed um, by the monks to like the T. So they have right faith, right knowledge, and right behavior, and within them they have others like right faith has other seven truths, and which means like all living things have a soul, and the soul is it's like precious. Non-living things don't have a soul. I found this funny that it needed to be added. So my TV doesn't have a soul, but my dog does, and the fleas on my dog also do have a soul. And every microorganism that is out there has a soul. They don't need potatoes because it's part of this idea that I found very life giving. That we are all living, we're all cohabitating this space, and that we all need each other to be able to live happily. Um, they also have the Mahavratas, which are five great vows, and non-violence, of course. Always being truthful, not stealing, being faithful to your partner or staying celibate, remaining free from attachment, and final, achieving moksha or that bliss. So they are particularly um, expressing in uh, ahis, uh, ahisma, which is that every living being has a soul, and that non-violence is the highest religion. This is something found written in the doors of their temples, and again, this is one of those things that are very um, nice to see. So Jain monks and nuns live according to the Mahabharatas, yet they take ahisma very seriously, which is this idea of not hurting any living organism at all. They walk around with a small broom, like a little broom style tool to help move little possible organisms out of their way so they can walk. They have minimal to no possessions. They are vegans, don't eat raw food, and only eat during the day. Because if they eat at night, they might eat a living organism on accident. So just think, you make yourself a sandwich at night with no light, and there's a roach, and you accidentally eat it. That's bad. So they only eat during the day. They don't cook, so they beg for food. They don't ride in vehicles because it's really bad for the environment. And they don't bathe. They wear a mouth cover and abstain from sexual intercourse to avoid killing any living organism. Again, these apply to either or. Um, Part of this of the Jain monks and nuns, of course, is the nakedness, um, and the diet. Well, the diet, I think it's pretty straightforward for both groups. But those two groups we saw at the beginning, where one was completely naked and the other one was wearing the white robe. This is something that sort of sets them apart, but it's part of the practices. Um, Cutting hair. The cutting of hair is a symbol of dedication to an ascetic lifestyle in Buddhism. In Jainism, is a there's a ritual held. It is also it's similar, but in Jainism, there's actual a ritual held called Lochan or Lokan, which is folks sit there and actually pull their hair out, like yank it, and their leader actually Moshavira actually did it in three fistfuls. The legend says it. So folks do this in public. They can do it in private if they want to, but mostly they do it in public and start pulling their hair out. Um, and this is done in with the goal of practicing self realization and self purification. So fasting. When we look at fasting, Jain monks and nuns sometimes eat only one meal a day, and sometimes abstain for days from food. In the past, um, a Jain monk died from starvation, and the government prohibited the practice of extreme fasting, but later retrieved the law due to the separation of church and state. So, actually, Jain folks went out there. Those who practice Jainism went out and marched and protested against this because the government couldn't tell them what they could and could not do when they were practicing their faith. In Buddhism, monks and nuns have a very disciplined regimen of meditating and abstaining from food after noon. It might not be that all Buddhist monks practice this, but from what I gather, most do. So there are some that, again, fasting is a big deal in the Buddhist uh, philosophy or practice. Um, it is this has to do with the Buddha's midway lifestyle, so they don't get like the Jains to the point of dying. They mostly just make sure they eat enough to be able to live a healthy life, but practice. And so it's not really called fasting, but like we would, but they don't because it's just how they live their life. They compared to the Jains, where I think both them and us will call it fasting when they're not eating for like an entire 3-4 days, especially if there's like death involved. And meditation is mostly practiced in both. I mean, it's all over both. It's part of the realizing what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. Nonviolence is perceived both as a vital and central practice, where in Buddhism, the lack of language supporting violence in its sacred text. So there's in Buddhism, from what I read, again, I'm not an expert. This is just my research. In Buddhism, you don't find text that supports violence that says, "Yeah, go and like destroy stuff." But and so folks are just always peaceful. There's nonviolence. There are monks who live a similar life to those in the Jain religion. And Jane, on the other hand, takes it to an extreme approach. Again, I mean, as I read when talking about even women, in this group, seeing women as not being able to achieve that blissful state because something that's part of them is killing organisms. So it's just a big. There's no negotiation as to nonviolence, and even those who are not monks, those who are not um, nuns in Jain practice, still are very much practicing um, these non-violence. Most are, excuse me, most are have professions that have little to do with polluting. Have professions that or help them keep their nonviolent life. Um, they also have they are vegans. They are very faithful to their spouses or celibate, and they are one of the most charitable um, religions or practices, which I thought was interesting. I when I was reading some of the material in the class, I came across the Sikhs, and I thought they were a very um, special kind of group. And I even saw them as very charitable, but apparently, compared to the Jains take the prize. And so, lastly, part of Buddhist lifestyle is following the Noble Eightfold Path, which has the eight divisions. And when these are followed, one gets to live that a better life and moving forward to uh, getting away from rebirth or achieving nirvana or enlightenment. And those are right view, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right. Um, what was the last one? Samadhi. Um, and within the first one in like right view, you see the importance of the Four Noble Truths, which are the beliefs of uh, suffering, the carving or desire or attachment, um, sort of getting yourself rid of that desire and attachment, ending that desire and attachment, and living the noble eighth path, eightfold path. It, it is interesting that this is seen as not a. Those were my notes. This is interesting that the eightfold path is not like a 12-step plan to be a good Buddhist, but rather, as I forgot where exactly I saw it, and somewhere my stuff or sites are there. So if you want to check any of this out, I believe it was a video that said it's more like exercising and getting more muscle. If you exercise that, you're able to abstain, and I think that temptation you're able to fight it off a whole lot easier. And conclusion, it is interesting to see how both religions contain so much of each other. The pathway to nirvana can look different in degree of practicing some of the principles, where Jain has a um, more central focus on trying to liberate the soul from karma and causing no harm. Buddhists have a similar idea of causing no harm and having good karma, but however, enlightenment is the goal. And similarly, in other practices or philosophies, including those developed in the Middle East, um, A common theme of nonviolence and karma exists, although the vocabulary around the idea may differ in the degree to which those principles are lived through. So, something I've learned in this class and even through this is that this idea of do unto others as you like to be done to yourself is sort of there. It just looks different. And also the idea of not hurting other folk, um, where in Jainism is not hurting any other living organism because they have a soul and the soul is precious. It might look different in Christianity where it's love your neighbor and take care of creation. So I really enjoyed this thoroughly. Um, I think I read more than I should have, but just could I mean I would never be able to completely say all the differences and the similarities because I'm just scratching the surface with this, but I hope this gives a good idea of what it could look like. And thank you so much for hanging out and watching this full presentation. If you did, if you got bored and you're just scrolling to the end, I also appreciate you trying to get through this. Yeah, bye.